Joining me are Graham Richardson, former Labor Minister and a Sky News host, and Kerry Chikarovsky, former New South Wales Liberal opposition leader. Kerry, how serious is this failing, or were the deaths in these homes inevitable in a pandemic, as Scott Morrison suggested last week? You know, it rains, you get wet.
I think it was always going to be difficult to contain the virus within aged care facilities, given the nature of the facility. People they're bed-bound. A lot of them have issues with dementia, so they're wanting to wander around. They don't want to be restrained. All those sorts of things. So it was always going to be difficult. And I do think it's interesting that we have a difference of opinion between, Dr. Brendan Murphy and a lawyer, because I would have thought that the medical advice was probably more reliable. Having said that, I think the Prime Minister did the right thing by saying, look, there were lessons that we've learnt. And everybody absolutely regrets that we haven't been able to apply some of those lessons earlier. But I think people are now taking it all very seriously. They've always taken it seriously, I should say, but they're now actually implementing whatever best practice can be in what are very difficult circumstances, Andrew. We forget.
No,
we've not done this before.
Kerry.
We've not done this before, so I think it's really difficult.
No, I've got it's difficult, but Graham, I'm picking up on the fact that Kerry says, well, that's what happens in a pandemic, but there are lessons learned and they're implementing them now. I would have thought, given that this virus had ripped through 2 nursing homes already in New South Wales, had ripped through nursing homes already in New York, causing horrific, those lessons might have been learned a little bit earlier and implemented a bit earlier. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah, and that's true. The difficulty is, even if that was true, even if it had happened, even if things had been implemented earlier, gee, it's difficult in nursing homes to keep things the way you want, because nursing homes don't operate on a rule book. They operate on how people are at any given time. You have wandering people. You have some who are bedridden. There's a huge mix, and that's a volatile mix when it comes to germs, when it comes to bugs. And I'm not sure that there's anything more that we could have done. I'd love to hop into Morrison, but I don't think I can on this one. I think he's done as well as anyone could be expected to do, given that there was no rule book to follow.
No, I got that, but given the examples before that had, Kerry, the fact is they put in things like you must wear PPE. They only did that about a month ago. You must wear PPE. You must clamp down on people going into these nursing homes. You can't have staff going from one nursing home to another, spreading potentially spreading the virus. They've done a whole number of things, but only in the last month. So I simply can't buy the argument that these were lessons that we had to wait until now to learn. I mean, it was so stark, staring obvious, some of this stuff, months before.
Well, Andrew, I'd have to disagree with some of the things you've just said, because I know, for example, in a number of the nursing homes in New South Wales, visitors were barred much earlier than a month ago. They were barred very early in the piece. I mean, I know this from personal experience, from friends of mine who were trying to visit their relations in nursing homes. I think the difference may have been...
You're talking Sydney, aren't you?
Talking Sydney, absolutely, in Sydney. That's what happened. And individual homes, in some ways, made up their own rules. Before anybody told them what to do.
Absolutely. Individual homes made up their own rules. But what I'm saying is the government and its regulator did not impose them on all homes in Victoria. This is the point. Yeah. This is the whole point. Anyway, look,
well, I think,
you're both quite right.
Victoria should have looked at what was happening in Sydney, because I think we've had some terrible experiences, yes, but we learnt from those very quickly. And as I said, the individual homes, the organisations that run those homes, they put in place some very stringent rules very early in the piece.
Yeah, look, some homes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I'm just wondering what the Commonwealth Government, which oversights all homes, could have done more of. And the Royal Commission will be having a lot to say on that very, very point. Graham, the jobs figures today, better than expected by many. 115,000 new jobs created last month, or 2/3 of them part-time. But that is, of course, before Victoria's latest shutdown, so that's going to get a hammering there. But on these figures alone, does this give you some hope that we might get out of this with less damage than many expected?
Yeah, it does. I think those figures weren't too bad. I mean, it's a big number. I'm not pretending it isn't, but gee, it could have been a lot worse. And I think there's hope in those numbers. I look at them and I say to myself, maybe it's, the doomsday sayers are saying we'll still be suffering from this in several years' time. I think there are signs now that we'll emerge from it a lot quicker than that. I'm becoming a slight optimist, Andrew.
Kerry, you?
Well, I think those figures would be the reason why Premier Gladys Berejiklian, for example, is trying to make sure that we keep the economy open in New South Wales, because they want to make sure that the next lot of figures, whilst they will be impacted by Victoria, clearly, that they're not going to get worse again. And I think that, that's the balance that the government, and, clearly South Australia have done the same thing. They're trying to make sure that they can keep their economy going by not having it impacted by all those terrible people coming from interstate who might bring the virus in and cause them to lock down again. But I think this is actually a case of, fingers crossed in many ways, Andrew, because we really need to hope that the virus is contained in large measure within Victoria and everybody else is allowed to get on with it, every other state. And I would absolutely hope, for example, that Premier Palaszczuk would decide that, with the numbers that she's got, with the containment that's going on within New South Wales, that she'd open those borders. Because I can tell you now, I've had friends who've just been to far north Queensland, and the people up there who are trying to get make a living by being tourist operators are tearing their hair out. They're in despair. This is the busiest time of year for them, and they're barely making a quid.
Well said, and so well said that I'm going to skate over the fact that you referred to terrible people, by which, of course, you meant Victorians, diseased Victorians being stopped. I got that, but water for ducks back. Graham, this, though, the economic belting we've had, I think you might be right. There's some cause for optimism. It may not be, it's going to be terrible, but maybe not as terrible as we'd feared. This surely puts an end to the global warming hysterics in some of the major parties saying, let's get really tougher about cutting emissions, which is a real economic belting. We can't afford that now.
No, we can't. And that's going to cause a lot of drama in my party in particular. But it's fact. I don't think that you can chase up that rat hole now. We've got others to chase, and we've got real problems. So I think that stuff, if you'll pardon the pun, goes on the back burner for some time.
Graham Richardson, Kerry Chikarovsky, thank you both so much for your time.